My name is Hector Simfokwe from ZNBC in Zambia. I've got two questions. The first one is targeted to His Excellency President Paul Kagame. I wanted to find out what you are going to do to realize African vision to have a permanent seat on the UN Security Council during your tenure as chairperson of the African Union. Then to His Excellency President Edgar Lungu, I wanted to get your comment of how you feel concerning this tour of duty in Rwanda, what you make of the visit to Rwanda.
Thank you. For me, this is a consolidation of the emerging view of the current African leaders that Africa should look to itself for sustenance and development. And I think that when you look at the resource base of most African countries, you discover that we are resourcefully very rich, but we have no resources to talk about. People come and exploit our resources for nothing, and we end up importing our own resources. Talk about technology, we don't have to look beyond the continent of Africa. We have others who have made a head start in terms of technological advancement, whom we should look to. And then that's the only way we can consolidate our independence, our oneness, our Africanness. The reforms that we're undertaking, I think, which His Excellency, my brother President Kagame referred to, are intended to bring out Africa, the potential that Africa has, the voice of Africa. I think that this particular visit for me is a consolidation of my firm belief in the oneness of Africa. There's a lot we can do. Like I said off camera, that Zambia and Rwanda should be the torchbearer, that there's a lot of benefits to be realized from cooperation between African states bilaterally before it becomes multilateral. I think that this particular trip, for me, has discarded a lot of misconceptions about the potential that lies in Africa. Are you telling me that, for example, emeralds or gold or silver or copper or cobalt in Congo, DR here, ends with a boundary? Mm-hmm. Are you telling me that the diamonds in Angola, for example, end with the Zambian boundary? There's no diamond on the Zambian side. So I think that we need to wake up, in short. This is, for me, a confirmation that if we wake up now, we have done justice to posterity. But if we go into slumber, then we have done a disservice, and posterity will judge us very, very harshly. That, in a nutshell, is my view of this trip. It just confirms what I've always believed in, the uniqueness of Africa, and the fact that it's been taken advantage of by others who had the benefit of sharing Africa in Europe those days, in 1890 and so on. You know the history. Thank you very much.
Yeah. During my tenure as chair of the African Union, my thinking is to do whatever is humanly possible, working with the other leaders of our continent, to try first and foremost bring even closer the African countries and the peoples of the continent, so that we can work on how we make progress on many fronts, including primarily the development of our continent. We are so behind, and picking from what my brother and colleague President Lungu has just said, it's a shame in a sense that Africa has almost everything it needs to be where we want to be, but we are still very far from achieving that in many areas. Now, on the specific question of the UN Security Council permanent seat, well, if it were that easy, or according to me, that should have been the case long ago, that Africa should have had a permanent representation on the Security Council. But as we very well know, all of us, things don't work like that in this world we live in. But there has been a process, there has been a discussion going on for a long time now as to how the UN Security Council can be reformed, and part of that being inclusion of the African continent's voice, deservedly so. But the discussion continues, and so many views continue to come up. So we will maybe intensify the discussion in the 1 year that we have to do what the African leaders have entrusted us to do. So there are many, I think, formulas that have been suggested, but the constant is the permanent. Permanent meaning, there are some who are permanent, there are others who represent their regions but are not permanent. So I think what you are talking about is this permanent seat. And I would, but to touch a little bit on that, there's so many views being raised, that permanent representation can be exercised in different ways. Do you choose 2 countries to permanently sit there, or one, or and that's it? Because here sometimes it may not be now the permanent representation of Africa, it might be the permanent representation of those countries. So there is another formula that says, okay, the countries in Africa can keep rotating in these seats, whichever number they give, if that ever comes to that point. So what is important is to know that these seats are for Africa. So once they are for Africa, then African countries can keep rotating in those seats, but they are permanent. You see what I mean? There are two opposed views. One is, do we pick 2 African countries and say, you go and sit for us permanently at the UN Security Council? In which case you're really having 2 things. You're having 2 countries sitting permanently, which means they also represent themselves as permanent. But they also, since they are African, you may say Africa is represented permanently there. But the other, again, as I said, is to say, okay, are these seats 1 or 2 or 3 for Africa? Yes, that's fine. If this is for Africa, then how we rotate in those seats as Africans is our business. It's up to you to decide which one you think is more representative. I have chosen mine, but that is, we will continue the debate and the discussions going forward, hoping that in the end we can actually have this representation with so much that may come with it, or I don't know what else. But there are many people around the world, or many countries, that are vying for this kind of seat or representation. So the debate is very complicated and complex in a sense, but yeah, but without even putting too much weight on this, there are other things that are of equal importance that we need to be paying more attention to, that are within our means to achieve, that we can actually do, and they'll be even more productive and meaningful to Africa, to Africans, than these hot seats that we may be struggling to achieve. Bringing together Africa, the unity of Africa, the integration in all aspects, political, businesses, and other things, and speaking with one voice in whatever forum is very productive, and even more productive than fighting for a permanent seat somewhere which you are not even sure you will get. So I will really try to, working with my brothers and sisters on the continent, try to achieve what is achievable, what is within our means, and that we haven't yet been able to reach. I think realistically that is the best way to go.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, sir. My name is Collins Mwai. I write for the New Times Daily. As of 31st December last year, the deadline given to Rwandan refugees living in the various countries to either return to the country or become citizens of the countries of their host countries lapsed through the cessation of the invoking of the cessation clause. We have a number of Rwandans living in Zambia. What has been the discussions between the two countries, or what have you agreed on? What will be their fate, and what happens to them going forward? Thank you. The two heads of state, yeah, you and the visiting president. Thank you.
One may suffice. Well, I think the whole idea behind that is not to make a refugee seat a permanent one. I think refugees, when as of origin, there are different causes. People can understand it differently, fine. But once there are these refugees, irrespective of what has created them, but which can also be looked at so that no more refugees are created, or that those that we already have, their problems are addressed, and maybe they end the refugee status. I think that is the whole idea. We can't just keep producing refugees or having refugees as an end in itself, I think. So two things, as you rightly said. One is either at a certain point, the reasons that made refugees have been addressed, and these people should feel comfortable to go back to their countries. Or whether this has ended or has not ended, there comes a point maybe where the countries hosting them may consider saying, okay, after all, these are Africans like us, and we can integrate them and they become part of us if they so choose. Because again, either way, it is dependent on choice. You don't force somebody to become your citizen, or You don't force somebody to go back where they ran from without understanding that certain conditions are fulfilled or problems have been resolved. So it is in this spirit that Rwanda has been discussing this problem with the different countries, actually, and in this case you asked about Zambia. Even with Zambia, the discussions have gone on as openly and as clearly as possible. And I think there is a good understanding of how to resolve this matter, working with other partners. It's not just the two countries, it's always going to include other partners. There are people under the UN that are responsible for refugees. They become part of that discussion. And as long as the environment is such that people can have this discussion, the parties concerned, I think for me that's the most important thing. And then the refugees themselves also are part of the equation. They have to, at one time, decide which way to go. So I think the discussions have always been very good, and a number of cases have been properly managed, and I think it gets better with time.
Thank you, Excellency. My name is Silvanus Karemera from Rwanda Broadcasting Agency. My question goes to you, both your Excellencies. The AU is undergoing major reforms, one being all countries to comply with their 0.2 levy on eligible imports. 2 years ago, Your Excellency, when this decision was taken in Kigali, only 21 countries have complied or agreed to comply with this good initiative. I'd like from you, both Your Excellency, some of the challenges that you see attached to this entire process, and specifically on His Excellency President Lungu. We understand that Zambia is one of the countries that houses a number of fugitives committed genocide here in Rwanda. I'd like to know, to hear from you, Your Excellency, on a position on that, in bringing these people to book. Thank you.
I'll start with the last part of your question. What we received in Zambia over the years, culminating into 1994, are refugees. And we don't know because we're not here. And then the international community and the UN have set up mechanisms which have been made available to us to identify the fugitives who are criminals and are wanted. And I think we'll comply with international protocols. But meanwhile, we have an understanding between Zambia and Rwanda to help each other in identifying these people and bring them to book. But we will not go outside the law of our country and outside international conventions in doing this. I think we were one of those who identified some 8 or so. We took them to Arusha, and the process took its part. But if there are any more remaining, I think we'll deal with them. That's what I can say. But I want to assure you, by echoing what my brother said, that we will not allow a situation where we have permanent refugees in Zambia. Whether they are fugitives who are running away as victims or they are perpetrators, I think the bottom line is that we have to put a closure to this sad chapter. Thank you very much.
Yeah, for the reform process, especially on the part of financing which you raised, well, I wish to say that 21 countries is not bad to begin with. And I know also that other countries, more countries have intention to start using the formula. I think the difficulty came about for, I would say, 2 reasons. One is that change, no matter what it means, even when you would think things are very clear, change by itself is a difficult thing to happen. Some people just resist the change without even reasons, or at least they wouldn't give good reasons. So switching from one thing you are used to another, whatever meaning it may hold, does not happen so easily. I think that is one part of the problem. The other part is, and we've been working on that, some people are not clear about what this implies. Some people thought, by using this formula, people will be paying much more than they were paying. Well, much more than they were not paying, because some of them actually, even with the old formula, don't pay. That's the whole problem. But a lot of effort has been put into trying to explain that actually this formula just makes it easy for collection of what is required to be paid. It has some level of automaticity, meaning it just happens. But still you will pay within the range of what a country has been assessed. There has been assessments for countries, people with bigger, smaller, medium economies. There is an assessment. But we have found that using this formula actually keeps more or less within the range of what was assessed before, even if it may not be exact. But there is that advantage that it actually happens automatically, and it doesn't burden countries so much, having to look for, put it in their budget and, competing priorities within each country. But there have been people going out and explaining this so that people don't have unnecessary worries about this formula. Even there are discussions. In fact, there were even some outsiders outside of our continent who were saying, this is going to interfere with the WTO, the World Trade Organization rules, and so on and so forth. They put up, it's like, but those outsiders were raising it not so much because there was anything to do with the WTO rules, but because they actually don't want this level of independence of Africa to be able to finance its own operations. You can understand if somebody is fighting to pay for your bills and stopping you to do it yourself. I think it doesn't take a very clever person to understand that there is something fishy behind that. Absolutely. So even because they were complaining, but the WTO itself was not complaining. Actually, WTO has assured us for them they have no complaint. So they don't know whoever is having a complaint and bringing up the WTO issue where they're getting it from. So somebody is even speaking on behalf of WTO to say that there is a problem here when WTO itself has no problem. But it's important to allow time for people to, even those who have unnecessary worries or who may have a distortion of one thing or another, to maybe get to understand it. It's healthy, it's normal, it's fine. You don't just want to say 0.2% pay and nothing else, and if somebody says, well, how about this? You say no time to ask, and I don't think things should also be done like that. So we have the task to explain, to show the origin, the need, and the actual possibility of achieving that, while we also, in the end, achieve many other intended goals that are very important to Africa and to the Africans. So I think there is good progress. And with time, people understand better the need and the possibility that Africa has for achieving what we want to do. So I have no worries myself, other than my main worry is that even those who may not use the formula and have something they thought they liked, I wish they were paying. But we always have cases where people actually don't even pay for what they may claim they are comfortable with. So there are many things that come along with that, trying a new formula that has a meaning, that makes it easy, and so on and so forth. But also Africa will have to think of, other than doing what we may all feel comfortable with, what happens if you don't actually do it, when you have promised you want to do it, or that you understand the reasons for doing it. So maybe an accountability process also will have to be in place so that we really fulfill part of the bargain, and so that Africa can move forward and stop being dragged back into what others have been living so fast.